I'm Sid Dobrin with Inventive Fishing, and I've been thinking about red snapper and the absolute insanity that's unfolding regarding red snapper fisheries management in the Gulf of Mexico. I mean, seriously, this is just getting nutty. I can't even begin to offer a full recap of the nuttiness that's been going on with red snapper fisheries management in the Gulf of Mexico, so let's just jump into the thick of it. Data shows that the red snapper fishery in the Gulf of Mexico is improving. Yet for some reason, the recreational season not only keeps changing, it keeps getting shorter. Over the last several years, NOAA Fisheries has altered the recreational red snapper harvesting season in the Gulf of Mexico more often than most anglers change their underwear. And in 2013, the season lasted 9 days. 9 days for recreational harvest? And what's at the center of this frustration? You guessed it. Once again, the lack of cooperation between federal management and state management agencies. And yes, frustration is the key word here. As the feds get more and more restrictive on recreational harvesting regulations, sport fishermen are getting really tired of the lack of consistency and the tightening of restrictions. So a few weeks ago, the directors of fish and wildlife agencies in Alabama, Florida, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Texas issued a joint statement announcing that they have, quote, developed a framework for cooperative state-based management of Gulf red snapper. The 5 states would work together to develop a new independent management body called the Gulf State Red Snapper Management Authority, GSRSMA, which would be comprised of the principal fisheries managers from each Gulf state, and most important, would no longer reside with the Gulf of Mexico Fishery Management Council. Given the recent privatization of the public red snapper resource and the increased recreational restrictions, of course sport fishermen have been cheering the move. But as we might expect, the commercial fishing industry is responding in a bit of a frenzy, as a move to a state-based management system would surely reduce the influence their industry has had on national policy for the last 30 years or so. You want proof of that influence? You don't have to look far beyond the Gulf of Mexico Fishery Management Council's distribution of red snapper rights when it forged the Red Snapper Catch Share program in 2006, giving substantial shares of the red snapper to commercial operators. According to the Coastal Conservation Association, fewer than 400 commercial operators now own 51% of the entire red snapper fishery, and their plans to allocate about another 20% of the catch to charter and for-hire businesses. The remaining allocations are going to be doled out to a 9-day catch season? So, a few days after the Gulf State Coalition made its announcement, I received a press release from Seafood Harvesters of America President Chris Brown criticizing the 5-state plan, arguing that, quote, the scheme will open the door to devastating overfishing and set a dangerous precedent that could unravel the responsible management of America's fisheries from under the landmark Magnuson-Stevens Act. I love the language here. It's a scheme, I tell ya. The statement shows that commercial fishermen have strictly adhered to their quotas, while recreational fishermen have violated theirs 6 of the last 8 years. Brown says, a plan designed to take quota from the commercial sector and increase the recreational quota even further will likely open the door to more unsustainable overfishing. Recreational fishermen should focus on creating an accountable fishery for themselves rather than using politics to reallocate access to American red snapper. Reallocate access to American red snapper? Really? That's the argument? That the commercial fishing industry is now an agency of access? That only through them can people get to their resource? This is the same argument we're starting to hear about inshore net bans in North Carolina, too. And I'm not buying it. The idea that the commercial fishing industry is doing a service to those beyond access is wrought with problems. And let's face it, this has nothing to do with providing access to a resource of the commons. This has to do with who has the bigger slice of the snapper pie. This is big money. We're talking about big money. And if the commercial fishing industry senses any chance that their 51% might even diminish a little, let alone potentially not increase, then they're going to come up with all sorts of ways to defend their, quote, way of life. That's a term Brown uses to describe what's at risk for the commercial fishing industry if the state-based plan is implemented. Oh, and I've got plenty to say about the idea of maintaining a way of life, but I'll save that for another venue. Now, fortunately, the presidents of the American Sport Fishing Association, the Billfish Foundation, the International Game Fish Association, the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation, the Coastal Conservation Association, Guy Harvey's Ocean Foundation, the Center for Coastal Conservation, and the National Marine Manufacturers Association all signed a letter to the governors of the 5 Gulf states supporting the state-based Gulf red snapper management model, citing the strength of the sport fishing community as economic contributors to each state, as contributors to conservation efforts, and as voters. So I too want to confirm, Inventive Fishing's support of the state-based Gulf Red Snapper Management Plan and the formation of GZRSN as we join these other important industry, conservation, and political organizations acknowledging support for this new plan. And I urge you to do the same. Fish on. Can't.